Now let's look at roles and permissions because when it comes to configuring user accounts, it's the roles and permissions where you'll spend a lot of your time. So let's scroll up and go to people. And from this page, you can see all of the available users, which we have already covered. Now scroll up and click on permissions. And here you can see all of the available permissions on this Drupal site. Now, as you install modules and create content types and vocabularies, this page will grow. Okay, so just be aware of that. On large Drupal sites, this page can be very big, but right now it's not that big. There's not that many permissions. Now, before we move on to things, let's discuss what a permission is. Now, a permission allows you to do something on a Drupal site, such as create, edit, or delete content, manage site configuration, and you can also use it to control access to certain content on the site. So if we scroll down, you can see that we have this permission called view comments. This allows you to view the comments on a Drupal site. And right now, anonymous users and authenticated users can view comments. And then if we scroll further down, you can see permission to create articles and basic pages, as well as deleting articles and basic pages. And then if we scroll further down, you can see permission to administer URL aliases, access to the search, access to administer menus and menu items. Trust me, there are a lot of permissions. Now, each role gets its own column. And so here you can see we have 3 roles currently: anonymous user, authenticated user, and administrator. Now, one thing I should mention is that permissions can only be assigned to roles, and then a role is assigned to a user. You can't assign a permission directly to a user. So let me go to people and I'll open it up in another tab. And then if I edit a user account, you can see here under roles that only a role can be assigned to a user. You cannot assign permissions. So just remember that. Only roles get assigned to users and permissions get assigned to roles. So let me just close this tab. Now, assigning a permission to a role is pretty simple. Just find the permission you want to assign. So let me scroll all the way up. Where is it? To the comment section. And then let's say, for example, I want to assign this post comments to anonymous user. All I have to do is check the checkbox in the anonymous user role. And that's it. That's how simple it is to assign a permission to a role. Now, you may have noticed that all of the permissions in this administrator role are checked and the checkboxes are disabled. Why is that? Well, Drupal allows you to assign a role as an administrator role, meaning it'll get all of the permissions automatically assigned. Now, if I open up the configuration page in a different tab and then go to content, and then if we scroll down to the administrator role section, here you can see that the role called administrator has been assigned as the administrator role, meaning that this role will get all of the new permissions automatically assigned to it. But if you want to turn off this functionality, you can simply select none and then save the page, and that's it. So you don't have to have this functionality on, but personally, I always leave it on. And if you install Drupal using the standard installation profile, this should automatically be configured, and you should automatically have the administrator role. So let me just close this tab and let's go back to permissions. Now, the anonymous user role is a hard-coded role which is given to non-logged in users when they come to a Drupal site. So if you want to control what a non-logged in user or a public user can access and see, then simply assign permissions or remove permissions from this role. Now, the authenticated user role is another hard-coded role, but this role is assigned to logged in users. So let me open up the people's page in another tab again. And then if I click on add user and then scroll down to roles, you can see that authenticated user role is checked and disabled. So every user gets the authenticated user role. And then if I go back and then edit one of the existing accounts, you can see that authenticated user is already checked and it is disabled. So let me just close this tab. So let's scroll up and go to roles. And from this page, you can see all of the available roles. And if you want to create a new role, just simply click on add role and then enter in a role name and then click on save. And that's it. Another thing you can do from this page is if you click on the down arrow, so click on the down arrow on anonymous user and then click on edit permissions. And now you only see the role which you are editing permissions for. In our case, it is anonymous user instead of all of the roles. Now, this isn't a problem with just 3 roles, but I've worked on websites which have 10 user roles. And this permissions page with all of the roles can be hard to navigate when you have that many roles. So it's good to have a page where you can see all of the permissions for a single role. Okay, let's go back to the standard permission page. So I'll just go back to people and then permissions. And now let's modify the anonymous user role. Now, normally when I adjust roles and permissions, I always like to have 2 browsers opened up. Okay, so this one on the left, I'll be logged in as an administrator, and then I'll open up another browser and I'll pop it here on the right, and then I'll be an anonymous user in this browser. So I can easily make a change here and then see if the change actually works here in this browser. And this is a good way to actually configure your roles and permissions. Always be logged in using 2 browsers because it is very time consuming to make a change here, then log out and then log back in, and it's all just very, very difficult. And also adjusting permissions does take a bit of trial and error, especially if you are new to Drupal, because figuring out what certain permissions do can be difficult. Okay, so I always recommend to have 2 browsers open up. One browser where you are logged in as an administrator, adjusting the permissions, and then in the other browser, you test out the permissions. So let's start things off by clicking on this article. And then if we scroll all the way down, you can see the comments. Now let's actually remove these comments so anonymous users cannot see it. So if I go back into this browser, all I need to do is simply uncheck view comments. And then if I scroll all the way down and click on save permissions, and then if I refresh and scroll down, you can see that the comments are no longer visible. And then if I go back into this browser, and let's take things one step further. So let's scroll down all the way to the node section. And if I uncheck, and let's keep scrolling down to view published content. Now, if you want to stop users from actually viewing published content, you can uncheck this view published content. And then if I refresh this page, you can see we have an access denied because I have removed the view published content permission. But let's just turn that back on because this permission is pretty important. Without it, you won't be able to see most of the content on a Drupal site. So just be aware of that. This permission is very important to see any content which is created by a content type. So now if I refresh, I can see the page. Perfect. Now let's go to the home page and we have this little search bar here. Now, if I search for, say, blog, it'll redirect me to the search results. Perfect. But if you want to turn off the search in total, scroll all the way down and then simply uncheck use search from the anonymous user role and then click on save permissions. And then if we refresh, we no longer have access to the search page. And then if we go to the home page, you can also see that the block has disappeared as well.